Joining me now is New Jersey Senator and former presidential candidate Cory Booker. Senator Booker, thank you very much. Thanks for being with us. You're also, of course, former mayor of Newark. How do you feel about the drones?
Look, at this point, we need to save lives, and it's really important that in public spaces, people are abiding by the directives. I was the mayor of the neighboring city to Elizabeth. We put up security cameras all over our city. Residents welcomed them, celebrated them, and it's very similar to that. And I know Mayor Bolwich. He's a pretty amazing mayor and one of the best we have in New Jersey.
Let's talk about the terrible spike of deaths in New Jersey this week, passing 3,000, the testing shortage. Here you've got the mayor now, rather the president telling mayors and governors it's up to you. The governors are in charge. The governors don't have access to tests. They can't get tests from China the way the federal government can.
Look, there's an old wisdom that says you do not have to attend every argument you're invited to. This is a president who's not assuming his moral authority that we really need him to do, not doing the levels of coordination and rationalizing of resources in our country, not rising to this challenge. But as we found out when he tried to assume constitutional powers he did not have, the governors make these decisions. And so I hope that every single one of them lets science be their guide, the well-being of their citizens be their guide, and do the balance that they have to do about what's best based upon facts and data for the residents of their states.
What can you as the senator do about this horrendous situation in Andover Township, New Jersey, the nursing home deaths, people not being reported properly to officials and to their families, more importantly?
God, thank you for asking about this. It's a horrific, outrageous situation. We had 17 bodies discovered, and it's an affront to human dignity, to the humanity that was lost, as well as to the families, to the community at large. So my team has been in touch with the mayor there and others to make sure that we're doing what we need to do. But it also highlights something, is there are still very vulnerable populations with this virus can have devastating effects. And we have to do a lot more, frankly, nationally than we're doing now, including having access to testing and tracing and more to make sure that we can really get a handle on this, and more resources, frankly, to the vulnerable populations to be able to protect them.
Speaking of vulnerable populations, Governor, African Americans are accounting for 20% of the deaths that we know of, at least in New Jersey, and it's probably underreported. What can be done to help those most vulnerable people who are often living in the most dense areas?
Well, this virus has highlighted already existing disparities. There's a deep anguish in our country that's existed for generations, where African Americans have savage disparities when it comes to health outcomes. And we see this on maternal mortality rates 4 times higher for African American women than for white women in a country that's already the dead last when it comes to maternal mortality. And so this is really an indictment of these challenges that many of us have been fighting to fix for a long time. And so right now, I've called upon this administration to collect the data so it can inform our strategies. We need to be making sure that those communities that are vulnerable, that they're getting more of the support that they need to protect themselves during this virus. And then after this, our circles of empathy must expand. Our moral imagination must grow a lot greater so that we have a national urgency to address these savage inequalities. And we're learning the hard way in America right now that, as it is in my parents' generation, the civil rights generation, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, because when you have vulnerable populations, this virus knows no bounds, and spreading there affects the health and well-being of people elsewhere, as we've seen with the paid sick leave, for example. We already know factually before this virus that not having paid sick leave forces millions of Americans to go to work when they have the flu and other contagions, and has spread those diseases and those challenges in the past. Well, now that's just been supercharged. So we need, as a nation, to come together to fight through this, not allow the petty politics that we're seeing on a national scene undermine common sense and care and concern. And then coming out of this, as we have other crises, let's grow from this, learn from this, and do better by each other. because we are the United States of America, and we are stronger when we lead with love and concern for vulnerable populations.
Senator, I know you're working on the small business, the gaps in the loan program, but is there anything that you as a Democrat can do about the Democratic leaders and the Republicans not dealing with each other in Congress?
Yeah, look, what I do is what we've done on bigger issues in the past, like criminal justice reform. For example, Senator Daines and I, Senator from Montana, have a really big bipartisan fix to a lot of problems small businesses and nonprofits are finding, which is they can't even get lending institutions to help them even begin the process. And, you know, small businesses are the backbone of our country. And so we need less partisanship, more compassion and concern. And I think Chuck Schumer right now is standing in the right place. We need to make sure that, yeah, we need to re-up certain programs, but we also need to get critical resources to our states and our localities who are in financial freefall. We have hospitals right now that still don't have the resources they need. A lot of our rural hospitals, as Joe Manchin was talking with me just this week, are on the brink right now. And so we need to make sure we do the small business program right. I think Senator Daines and I have an answer to a lot of the challenges small businesses and nonprofits are facing. We need to re-up the fund overall, but we also have to act now to help cities and states, towns that are in financial freefall, might have to cut services, firefighters, teachers, and we must help our hospitals. We can do this all at the same time. We need to come together and be less about the partisanship and more about meeting the urgency. Massive challenges like this demand massive responses.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.